Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining me here today so that we can discuss Van Wilder, The Rise of Taj. So, in this movie, Kal Penn reprises his role from the original Van Wilder as Taj, and he's looking to kind of prove himself, right? Like in the original Van Wilder, he was able to accomplish his goals of partying and, meeting girls and all that, but it was as a sidekick. Now he wants to take the lead. He heads over to the UK and he decides he's going to make his own name, his own reputation in this new place, and he's going to become like the Van Wilder of this new university. But as soon as he gets there, he realizes that things aren't going to go as planned because he thought he was getting into like this prestigious fraternity. Not going to happen. He's in like the only place he can get in is like the worst fraternity on campus. But much like his mentor, Van Wilder, he's not going to give up. He's going to put in the work. He's going to try to turn this, nerd fraternity into a party fraternity and prove that he is just as capable as his mentor of turning, kind of a campus into like just a complete party zone. And that's the story here. So, unfortunately, while I like the original Van Wilder, I found this to be very mediocre at best. I don't think it's as bad as some people say it is. Some people say it's like one of the most unfunniest movies ever made. I don't really agree with that. But I do think a lot of the humor falls short, and it's not Kal Penn's fault because we've seen him in Harold and Kumar that he's more than capable of being in a leading role. I just think the writing here is really bad. I think someone looked at Van Wilder and was like, well, these are all goofy, over the top, just silly kind of jokes. So I'm just going to go that way. I'm just going to make everything about sex or make like a reference to, crude references. And while those jokes worked in Van Wilder for the most part, they also seemed to have a little bit of thought put into them, and they were being like, they had an ensemble cast to pull it off. Here, that's not really the case. We just end up with a bunch of like either not funny or like barely funny jokes. There's really not a lot of like big laugh out loud moments in The Rise of Taj, which is a shame. It just ends up being kind of a lame comedy at the end of the day. Again, it's not Kal Penn's fault. He tries, and they try to get the tone, but it just doesn't work. The charm and like the charisma of the first movie is kind of missing here. You just end up with like a bunch of sex jokes, and most of them are pretty lame or stuff you've heard a million times. But I don't have an issue with recycled jokes. I really don't have an issue with recycled concepts in movies like this. But I just wish they would have put a little bit of creativity into it, or put a little bit more effort into making the jokes more than just like the most base, crude stuff. It just doesn't. It's just not as funny. And in the end, I think this movie just kind of like falls flat. So I would give it a light thumbs down. I don't think it's like aggressively terrible, but will I ever want to watch this again? No. And it's been like over 15 years since I've seen it. And I was kind of dreading it when I was doing this Van Wilder series rewatch. But anyway, that's my review for Van Wilder, The Rise of Taj. I can't give it a recommendation, but I also don't think it's quite as bad as some people seem to think it is. Anyway, that's my review. If you want to check out more, I've got a playlist right here on YouTube. But thanks for watching this review, and hopefully I'll see you soon.